The world knows Simone Biles as the greatest gymnast who has ever lived. 11 Olympic medals, 23 World Championship golds. A body of work so dominant that gymnastics scoring rules had to be rewritten, but behind that unmatched record is a story most fans only know in fragments. A childhood spent in and out of foster care before she even started school. A survivor of one of the largest abuse scandals in sports history. A single, devastating moment on the world's biggest stage where the greatest gymnast alive simply had to stop mid-competition. And now, quietly, without fireworks or a press conference, a truth she's been circling for years. At 29 years old, Simone Biles has finally said, almost in passing, what millions of fans had already started to suspect. How does someone who has already achieved literally everything her sport has to offer find the courage to just walk away on her own quiet terms? If Simone Biles' story has ever inspired you, leave a like before we begin. This one's for her. Her biological mother struggled with substance abuse, and as a result, Simone and her siblings spent time in and out of foster care during her early childhood. For a time, she and her sister Audrey lived with their grandfather, Ron Biles, and his wife, Nellie, in Texas, an arrangement that, in 2003, became permanent when Ron and Nellie legally adopted both girls, raising them as their own daughters rather than grandchildren. It was Nellie and Ron who Simone would grow up calling Mom and Dad, the two people who gave her the stability her earliest years had never offered. At age 6, during a daycare field trip to a local gymnastics center, a coach noticed Simone's raw natural power and flexibility and encouraged her to enroll in classes. What started as an accident of scheduling became the beginning of an extraordinary career. Her early coach, Amy Borman, spent over a decade shaping Simone's raw talent into technical precision, building not just a gymnast, but someone who would eventually redefine what the sport's greatest athletes were even capable of attempting. A little girl who had once bounced between foster homes had found, almost by chance, the one place in the world where she felt completely in control. Rising through elite gymnastics is punishing under the best circumstances, grueling training hours, constant injury risk, and a scoring system that leaves almost no room for error. By her mid-teens, Biles was already outperforming grown adults in a sport typically dominated by teenagers, developing a signature explosiveness that coaches and commentators struggled to even categorize using existing terminology. In 2013, at just 16 years old, she won her first world championship all-around title, defeating established veterans and instantly marking herself as the sport's next dominant force. She was competing in an era stacked with formidable rivals, gymnasts from Russia, China, and her own U.S. teammates. But Biles brought something into the sport nobody had quite seen before, skills so difficult that several would eventually be named directly after her in the code of points. By 19, heading into the 2016 Rio Olympics, the gymnastics world universally expected her to dominate. What they didn't yet know was just how much private trauma she was carrying into that Olympic cycle, a truth that wouldn't become public for 2 more years. August 11, 2016, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, the women's individual all-around final. Biles entered as the overwhelming favorite, and she delivered a performance that many analysts still consider one of the greatest all-around showings in Olympic history, commanding routines on vault, bars, beam, and floor that combined near flawless execution with degrees of difficulty her competitors simply couldn't match. She won gold with a margin over the silver medalist so large it was almost unheard of at the Olympic level. Across the Rio Games, she would ultimately claim 4 gold medals and 1 bronze, instantly cementing her as the finest gymnast of her generation. What the world didn't know while celebrating that performance was the darker truth Biles was carrying privately, that she, like more than 150 other athletes, had been sexually abused by former USA Gymnastics team Dr. Larry Nassar under the guise of medical treatment. Biles publicly disclosed her abuse in January 2018, becoming one of the most prominent voices in a scandal that would eventually bring down USA Gymnastics' entire leadership structure and result in Nassar's imprisonment for what amounted to a life sentence. The gold medal moment the world remembers from Rio had actually happened while Biles was silently carrying one of the heaviest burdens imaginable. What followed cemented Biles not just as a champion, but as one of the most influential athletes of her generation. She would go on to become the most decorated gymnast in world championship history, winning 23 individual and team world titles across her career, alongside her Olympic medal total of 11, placing her among the most decorated Olympians in American history regardless of sport. Beyond medals, Biles became a powerful advocate for survivors of abuse, testifying before the U.S. Senate in 2021 about the institutional failures that allowed Nassar's abuse to continue for years, delivering emotional testimony that helped push for federal accountability legislation. She had 4 separate skills named after her across multiple apparatuses, an almost unheard of honor reflecting just how far ahead of the sport's difficulty curve she consistently operated. For years, Biles seemed unstoppable, dominant, fearless, and years ahead of every competitor chasing her. But even the greatest gymnast alive wasn't immune to the sport's hidden psychological dangers. And in the summer of 2021, the entire world would witness exactly what that cost looked like, live, on the biggest stage in sports. Here's what most fans didn't fully understand until it happened in front of them. At the Tokyo Olympics in July 2021, during the team final, Biles performed a vault and immediately appeared disoriented mid-air, badly under-rotating the skill. Moments later, she withdrew from the competition and eventually from most individual finals, citing what gymnasts call the twisties, a terrifying phenomenon where an athlete suddenly loses their spatial awareness mid-air, making even routine skills potentially life-threatening. Biles was remarkably candid about the reason, publicly stating that her mental health had to come first, that continuing while disoriented mid-air risked catastrophic injury. The reaction was polarizing. Some hailed her as a pioneer, opening a long-overdue conversation about athlete mental health. Others criticized her decision, unaware of just how physically dangerous the condition actually was for elite gymnasts attempting skills of her difficulty level. It was, by nearly every account since, one of the most consequential moments in the modern history of athlete mental health advocacy. A global superstar choosing her well-being over a medal, in real time, in front of billions of viewers. 3 years later, Biles returned for the Paris 2024 Olympics, winning 3 additional gold medals and a silver, completing one of the most celebrated comeback stories in Olympic history and answering, definitively, anyone who doubted her return. Away from competition, Biles built a life that increasingly seemed to matter more to her than any additional medal count. In 2023, she married NFL safety Jonathan Owens in a private ceremony, a relationship that has remained one of the more publicly documented aspects of her post-Olympic life, often shared through her own social media. In 2024, Biles opened up publicly about experiencing a miscarriage, sharing the loss with fans as part of her ongoing effort to be transparent about the parts of life that don't come with medals attached. Following the Paris Olympics, speculation about her future intensified. In her Netflix docuseries Simone Biles Rising, she admitted the moment felt bittersweet, acknowledging that Paris may have represented the emotional peak of her competitive career. Throughout 2025 and into 2026, Biles's competitive calendar remained entirely empty. No training camps, no international meets, no formal announcements. She stepped back from public gymnastics appearances, focusing instead on public speaking, charitable work, and her marriage. Then, in comments to Sports Illustrated, she said the quiet part out loud, without ever framing it as a dramatic announcement. "I've accomplished so much, there's almost nothing left to do. I'm at a point in my career where I'm humble enough to know when to be done." No press conference, no farewell tour, just an honest admission, delivered almost in passing, confirming what millions of fans had quietly suspected for over a year. Today, at 29, Simone Biles has not issued a formal retirement announcement, but every indicator points toward a woman who has already made peace with stepping away on her own terms, rather than the sport's traditional Olympic timeline. She continues to focus on her marriage to Jonathan Owens, her advocacy work for abuse survivors, and business ventures outside gymnastics, while remaining notably silent about a potential run at the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, a home soil games that would have been an obvious career capstone under different circumstances. Biles didn't need a dramatic goodbye to prove her greatness. She'd already proven it. What she needed, in the end, was simply permission to be done. She was a little girl bounced between foster homes, given stability only when her grandparents chose to become her parents. She became the most decorated gymnast in history, 11 Olympic medals, 23 world titles, and skills so groundbreaking they now carry her name permanently in her sports record books. But in the end, it wasn't another gold medal that revealed who Simone Biles truly was. It was a quiet, unshowy admission that she was finally, humbly, done chasing more. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a champion can do isn't defying gravity one more time. It's simply knowing, without needing anyone's permission, exactly when to stop. If Simone Biles' journey has meant something to you, share your favorite memory of her below. Her story in gymnastics may be complete, but her legacy is only just beginning to be understood.